desperate attempt to salvage any hope, Jungkook laid Wyn's lifeless body in the car and raced to the hospital. The doctors, however, delivered a devastating conclusion. Wyn was dead. His heart, already shattered, crumbled into irreparable pieces. He cried uncontrollably, the weight of the doctor's word intensifying the storm of emotions within him. In the sterile hospital corridors, his cries echoed a haunting symphony of anguish and loss that seemed to reverberate endlessly. Realizing he needed to inform his parents, Jungkook sought his phone only to realize he had left it in the room. With a heavy heart, he called his mom using the reception phone, each word carrying the weight of unbearable news. Jungkook, struggling to speak through his sobs, called his mom. Jungkook, hello, mom? Mrs. John's heart raced, sensing the distress in Jungkook's voice. Mrs. John worried. Jungkook, son, what happened? Why are you crying? Jungkook couldn't utter a word, overcome with intense sorrow. Mrs. John, Jungkook, tell me, where are you? Before Jungkook could respond, he fainted, leaving Mrs. John frantic. Mrs. John shouting, Jungkook, can you hear me? Jungkook? The receptionist, witnessing Jungkook's collapse, picked up the phone. Receptionist, hello? Mrs. John, hello? Who are you? And where is my son? Receptionist, please come to City Hospital, ma'am. Your son is here and he just fainted. Mrs. John, increasingly worried. Hospital? Alright, I'm coming. Mr. John, now concerned, approached Mrs. John. Mr. John, what happened? Why are you so worried? Mrs. John, worried. We need to go to the hospital. Mr. John, worried and shocked. But why? What happened? Mrs. John, I don't know anything. We just need to go and see. They rushed to the hospital in the night. Upon entering, they inquired about Jungkook and headed to the room, where he lay unaware of the heartbreaking news awaiting them. Mr. and Mrs. John's heart clenched with dread upon seeing Jungkook's blood-stained shirt. Mrs. John rushing towards him and crying, What happened to my son? Why is he covered with blood? Doctor, nothing happened to him, ma'am. He just fainted. He was crying so badly and I guess he was really in shock. The tears overwhelmed him to the point of fainting, but he is perfectly fine. Mr. John, shock? What shock? And whose blood is this then? And what is he doing here? Mrs. John, wait. Wine? Where is Wine? He went to meet Wine. As Jungkook opened his eyes, he found Mr. and Mrs. John in front of him. Jungkook, restless, worried. Wine, Wine. He started crying and Mrs. John hugged him to console him. Mrs. John, Jungkook, calm down. Everything is fine. What happened? When Jungkook broke the hug, he rushed outside with Dr. Mr. and Mrs. John following him. Jungkook reached the room where Wine's lifeless body lay, and the weight of reality hit him once again. Mr. and Mrs. John's heart clenched with anguish as they witnessed Wine's lifeless form covered in blood. Tears streamed down their face. Mrs. John, what happened to her? Wine? Mr. John, shocked, held Mrs. John tightly. Mrs. John crying, Honey, what happened to her? Why is she lying like this? Please do something. She pressed her eyes tightly, trying to control her tears, while Mr. John held her tightly. Jungkook, devastated, sat beside Wine, crying as he looked at her face. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently started wiping her face, stained with blood. Mr. and Mrs. John couldn't hold back their own tears, witnessing Jungkook's heartbreaking state. Despite the grim reality, Jungkook held on to the hope that Wine would somehow wake up. With trembling hands, he tenderly wiped the blood from her lifeless face, a silent plea in his eyes. The sterile, hostile atmosphere of the hospital room contrasted sharply with the warmth that once radiated from your presence. His desperate whispers filled the air, a fervent plea for you to wake up and shatter the nightmare that had engulfed his world. The room echoed with his heart-wrenching cries, as if trying to awaken you from an endless slumber. Yet the stillness persisted, and the reality of your lifeless form remained, casting a shadow over the agonizing scene. The day of Vine's funeral arrived, a somber occasion that cast a pall of sorrow over everyone in attendance. The grey skies seemed to mourn along with them, as if the heavens themselves were shedding tears for their loss. Jungkook, Mrs. John, Mr. John, and Luna stood by Vine's casket, their heart heavy with grief. Jungkook's tear flowed unabatedly, his face etched with pain and guilt. Jungkook whispering to Vine's casket, I am sorry, Vine. I wish I could turn back time and change everything. I love you so much. The air was heavy with sorrow as they said their final goodbyes, each word carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. The grey skies mirrored the somberness of their heart, a pageant backdrop to the farewell of a love lost too soon. Mrs. John and Mr. John held each other tightly, their faces etched with deep sadness. They grieved not only for Vine but also for their son, who carried the burden of regret. Mrs. John's voice trembling. She brought so much joy into our lives, didn't she? Mr. John. Yes, she did. We were blessed to have known her. Luna stood nearby, her eyes swollen from crying. She felt the immense loss of her sister in law, her protector, and her confidence. Luna teary eyed. Vine, I wish I could have saved you. I should have been there for you. As the funeral service continued, a sudden hush fell over the gathering. Jungkook, lost in his thoughts, suddenly felt a presence beside him. He turned his head and, to his shock, saw Vine standing there, her spirit smiling at him. Jungkook stammering in disbelief. Vine, is that you? Vine's spirit nodded, her smile filled with warmth and forgiveness. Vine in spirit form. Jungkook, there is no need to blame yourself. I forgave you a long time ago. Jungkook, his tears streaming down his face, reached out a trembling hand towards her, but his fingers passed through her ethereal form. Jungkook, voice breaking. Vine, I love you. I'm so sorry for not trusting you. Vine's spirit gently kissed Jungkook's cheeks, and he felt a soothing warmth wash over him. Vine in spirit form. I love you too, Jungkook. Let go of the guilt. Remember the love we shared. As quickly as she had appeared, Vine's spirit faded away, leaving Jungkook both stunned and comforted. He wiped away his tears, feeling a weight lifted from his heart. The funeral continued, but now there was a sense of closure and acceptance in the air. The John family, together with their friends and loved ones, bid their final farewell to Vine, carrying her memory in their hearts and the hope of a brighter tomorrow. After funeral, when he went to his room, he saw his phone, and when he checked it, he saw 20 missed calls from Vine. He felt so hurt and guilty that if he had picked her calls, then maybe she would be alive, maybe he could save her. When he was talking to himself, he saw Vine's spirit beside him. Jungkook was shocked and relieved. Jungkook, are you really with me? Vine nodded. Jungkook teary-eyed. But how? Vine wiped his tears. Because I can't live without you. You know na, Cookie? She smiled. Jungkook warmly smiled and hugged her. Jungkook, why you left me, Vine? I know I'm a very bad person. I'm sorry. I didn't trusted you. I didn't listen to you. I'm sorry. His voice was breaking with tears and guilt when Vine broke the hug. Vine, it is past, Jungkook. I forgive you. So don't cry. It's hurting to see you crying. So please, for me, stop crying. Jungkook wiped his tears. Vine, I wanted to tell you something, Jungkook. Jungkook, yeah, Vine, what's that? Tell me, in hospital also you wanted to tell me something, right? Wine. Yes, but now I am bounded. I can't tell you directly the truth. Jungkook. But why wine? Tell me now. Wine. You have to find out that. I will help you, but you have to find out. But that truth is related to my murder. Jungkook shocked. What? Wine. And that truth is related to our family. Jungkook was now more shocked. Jungkook, our family? You mean someone in our family killed you? Wine sighed. Wine, I can't tell you everything, Jungkook. I want you to find out. But please, don't trust anyone. Nobody, neither your parents nor your sister. Jungkook's determination burned bright in his eyes as he nodded firmly. Jungkook, you will stay by my side, won't you? Wine Spirit gazed at him with a gentle smile. Wine, yes, Jungkook, I will stay by your side until you uncover the truth. Jungkook couldn't help but ask with a hint of worry. But why can't you tell me everything now? Wine Spirit, there are forces at play, Cookie. Some things are beyond even the realms of spirit. Trust your instincts and unravel the mystery. I believe in you. Jungkook. But after that? Wine. After that, I have to go, Jungkook. It's important. Jungkook's face fell, a pout forming on his lips. He was already dreading the moment when he would have to let Wine go. Jungkook. Can't we just live with me? Wine, understanding his reluctance to part ways. Wine, it's not possible, Cookie. There are some rules of spirits, as I told earlier. He nodded sadly. Jungkook, but how will I find the truth, Wine? Wine reassured him with a warm smile. Trust your heart, Jungkook. The answer will reveal themselves when you least expect them. You are strong and I believe you can do it. Wine, I will help you every step of the way. Jungkook, don't worry. Just follow me and you will see the truth through your own eyes. With Wine's guidance and his determination to unravel the mystery, Jungkook embarked on a journey that would lead him to answer he sought, all while cherishing the moments he had with Wine's guiding spirit. As Jungkook and Wine continued to work together on unraveling the mystery behind her murder, a week passed. They diligently pursued leads and pieced together evidence, inching closer to the truth. In the Jeon household, there was an air of both hope and sorrow. Mr. Jeon speaking to Mrs. Jeon. Jungkook seems to be getting better, doesn't he? It feels like he's trying to move past the trauma. Mrs. Jeon. It's a relief to see our son finding some semblance of happiness again. But my dear, I must admit, I am still haunted by Wine's death and the fact that her murderers remain at large. Luna joined the conversation, her concern for Jungkook evident. Luna, Mom, I have spoken to the best detectives in the town and he is determined to find Wine's murderer. Mrs. John nodded, appreciating Luna's efforts. Luna, do you know where Jungkook is? I feel like he is putting on a strong front for us, but he is truly struggling. Have you noticed? He used to leave his room unlocked, even when Wine was with him. But now, after her death, he locks himself in whenever he is in there. Mrs. John, yes, Luna, I have noticed. Even during their arguments, he never locked himself in. Mr. John shared their concern for their son. Mr. John, I'm deeply worried about him, but I have to say I admire his resilience in trying to overcome the trauma. Both Luna and Mrs. John nodded, grateful for their son's strength during such tiring time. Mr. John, perhaps we should plan a getaway, a camping trip or a holiday. It might help lift our spirits. Jungkook could use a change of scenery. Luna, that's wonderful idea, Dad. I was actually thinking the same thing. Mrs. John agreed, but with Jungkook's well-being in mind. Mrs. John, let's discuss it with Jungkook first. We should not pressure him. He needs time. Mr. John and Luna nodded, understanding the delicate balance of helping their son heal while respecting his process. Jungkook returned home to find his family gathered in the lobby. Mr. John called out to him, concern evident in his voice. Mr. John, Jungkook, we are thinking of planning a trip. It might bring about a change and help you feel better. Mrs. John chimed in, her tone gentle and understanding. Mrs. John, if you think it's right time, Jungkook could sense the genuine concern in his family's eyes. Their desire to see him recover touched his heart. Jungkook, alright. Luna, Mr. John and Mrs. John exchanged happy glances, relieved to see Jungkook willing to give it a try. Later, as Jungkook entered his room, Wine's spirit appeared before him. Wine, Jungkook, don't go on this holiday. Jungkook was surprised by her request. Jungkook, why Wine? They are just trying to help. Wine, trust me Jungkook, it's not safe. Jungkook agreed, swayed by Wine's words. Jungkook, alright Wine, I won't go. He smiled, feeling a sense of connection with her presence. Just then there was a knock on his door and Luna entered. Luna, Jungkook, Mom said dinner is ready. Are you coming? Jungkook looked at Luna, his smile fading. Jungkook, I'm not hungry and I have changed my mind about the trip. I am sorry, Luna. Luna appeared surprised and concerned by his sudden change of heart. Luna, but why? You were okay with it earlier. Jungkook, things changed, Luna. I just don't feel like going anymore. Luna nodded, understanding that something had shifted in Jungkook's feelings. Luna, alright Jungkook, if you ever wanted to talk or need anything, just let me know. As she left his room, Jungkook's thoughts were consumed by the sense of foreboding Wine had shared with him. Jungkook and Wine had been working tirelessly to uncover the truth about Wine's murder. They searched everywhere, leaving no stone unturned, and finally their relentless efforts led them to a shocking discovery. One day they stumbled upon the unimaginable truth as he found out the murderers, and Jungkook couldn't believe his own words when he said, "Who killed Wine?" Guess and tell me in the comments. Wait for part 3 and subscribe to my channel.